It was a dark and chilly night as I pedaled through the empty streets, trying to make my deliveries on time. The only sounds were the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind and the hum of my bike as it cut through the stillness. As I approached the delivery location, my unease grew. The houses were set back from the street, shrouded in shadows. There were no streetlights, and the only illumination came from the dim glow of windows. I parked my bike and approached the house, feeling a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. As I reached for the bag of food, I heard the footsteps behind me. My heart raced as I turned to see two masked men standing in front of me. The suddenness of their appearance made me jump, and I could feel my hands shaking. "Give us the food and your wallet," one of the men said, brandishing a knife. I could see the gleaming metal in the darkness, and my heart sank. I knew it was no use trying to resist, so I complied with their demands. The men snatched the items from me and disappeared into the shadows. As I stood there, alone and helpless, I realized that they had taken my phone as well. Panic set in as I tried to think of what to do. How would I contact the police? How would I make my other deliver? I wandered around for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to do before finally deciding to make my way back to the restaurant. I walked in, shaken and distraught, and explained what had happened. The restaurant manager was sympathetic and immediately told me that we should call the police. I couldn't help but wonder, though, what if the robbers weren't just random criminals? What if they had targeted me specifically? It was a thought that haunted me for days to come. After the traumatic robbery, I went to the police station to file a report. The officers took down my statement and promised to do everything they could to catch the culprits. But as the days passed, there was no progress in the case. I began to lose hope of ever finding the robbers. One day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I remembered the address of the house where I had made the delivery, and I went there to investigate. When I arrived at the house, I noticed something strange. The curtains were drawn, and there was no sign of life inside. I rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. Just as I was about to leave, I heard shuffling inside the house. Then the door slowly opened, and a woman appeared, looking nervous and jittery. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice shaking. I explained that I was a delivery man who had been robbed in the area and that I was trying to gather more information. The woman's demeanor changed immediately, and she seemed guarded. "We don't know anything about that," she said, her eyes darting around. I found it odd that she was so defensive, but I didn't want to push too hard. I thanked her for her time and left, feeling even more suspicious than before. As I rode away on my bike, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that house. Could it be possible that the robbers were somehow connected to the people who lived there? I didn't know what to think, but I knew I needed to find out more. Feeling uneasy and suspicious about the owners of the house, I decided to pay them a visit again the next day. I rode my bike back to the street where the robbery had occurred and found the house that had ordered the food. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I knocked, but still no response. It was as if no one was home. However, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. I went back to the police station and reported my suspicions about the owners of the house. The officers listened carefully and promised to investigate further. Later that day, the police went to the house to conduct a search. To their surprise, they found the delivery bag that was stolen from me the previous night, along with other stolen items. It was clear that the owners of the house were the robbers who had targeted me. As it turned out, they had planned the robbery for weeks and had been targeting delivery drivers specifically. They would order food to be delivered to their house and rob the drivers when they arrived. The police quickly apprehended the suspects and took them into custody. They were later charged with robbery and sentenced to several years in prison. I was relieved that justice was served, but I couldn't help but feel traumatized by the experience. The incident had a profound impact on me, and I began to question whether the job was worth the risk. I knew that I had to make some changes if I wanted to continue working as a delivery man. I started to take self-defense classes and invested in better safety equipment, such as a GPS tracker and a body camera. I also made sure to only accept deliveries during daylight hours and in areas that were well lit and safe. Although I was more cautious now, I couldn't help but feel like I had lost some of my confidence and freedom. The robbery had taken a toll on me both mentally and emotionally, and I knew that it would take time to fully recover. In the end, I learned that sometimes the things we fear the most can happen when we least expect them. But with perseverance and a willingness to take action, we can overcome even the most challenging obstacles. I ordered food from my favorite restaurant, eager for a relaxing evening at home after a long day at work. The estimated delivery time was 45 minutes, so I settled in to watch some TV while I waited. When the doorbell rang, I jumped up to answer it. Standing on my doorstep was a man I didn't recognize. He had a scruffy beard and a greasy ponytail, and his eyes looked wild. "Delivery for you," he said gruffly, thrusting a paper bag at me. I took the bag and handed him the money, hoping he would leave quickly. But instead, he lingered on my porch, staring at me with unsettling intensity. "You're really pretty," he said suddenly, taking a step closer to me. "Do you live alone?" "That's none of your business," I said firmly, trying to close the door. But he put his foot in the way, blocking me. "Come on, baby," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Let's have some fun." I tried to push past him, but he was too strong. I felt a surge of panic as he grabbed my arm and pulled me towards it. I struggled against him, but his grip was too tight. Fear coursed through my veins as I realized I was in danger. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with his hand. "Shh, don't make a sound," he hissed. "I just want to have some fun with you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I frantically searched for a way out. I had never been in this kind of situation before, and I didn't know what to do. My mind raced as I tried to come up with a plan. Suddenly, I remembered the pepper spray my friend had given me for protection. I had never used it before, but I knew I had to try. I fumbled in my purse for the small canister, praying it was still there. When I finally found it, I aimed it at the man's face and pressed down on the trigger. He recoiled in pain, clutching at his eyes and howling. I took advantage of his momentary weakness to break free and run inside my house, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against the door, breathing heavily and shaking with adrenaline. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had always thought of myself as a strong, independent woman, but in that moment I felt helpless and vulnerable. I knew I had to call the police, but I was too scared to move. I sat on the floor, clutching the pepper spray and waiting for what felt like hours. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens outside. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing help was on the way. When the police arrived, they found the man still writhing in pain on my porch. They arrested him and took him away, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in my stomach. I had always felt safe in my own home, but now that sense of security had been shattered. Over the next few days, I found myself jumping at every sound and constantly checking the locks on my doors and windows. I couldn't shake the feeling that he might come back, or that there were others out there like him. I knew I needed to take action to protect myself. I signed up for self-defense classes and invested in a security system for my home. I made sure to always be aware of my surroundings and to never let my guard down. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. I was still shaken by the experience, but I refused to let it control my life. I was determined to take back my sense of safety and security. As time passed, the memory of that night began to fade. But I never forgot the lesson it taught me, that danger can lurk in even the most unexpected places, and that it's up to us to be prepared and vigilant. I'm grateful for the pepper spray that saved me that night, and for the support of my friends and family who helped me through the aftermath. But most of all, I'm grateful for the reminder that I am strong and capable, and that I have the power to protect myself and those I love. From that moment on, I made a promise to myself to always be prepared, to never let my guard down, and to never forget the value of my own safety and well-being. I also made a point to share my story with others to raise awareness about the importance of self-defense and staying alert to potential danger. I volunteered at local community events, teaching others about basic self-defense techniques and sharing my story as a cautionary tale. Through these efforts, I found a sense of purpose and empowerment. I realized that I could use my experience to help others to make a difference in my community and to spread awareness about the importance of staying safe. Years later, I look back on that night as a turning point in my life. It was a terrifying and traumatic experience, but it taught me valuable lessons about strength, resilience, and the power of community. I still order food from my favorite restaurant, but now I always make sure to check the delivery person's identification and to stay alert to potential danger. And I always keep my pepper spray close at hand, a reminder of the importance of being prepared and staying safe. Looking back, I'm grateful for the lessons I learned and the person I became as a result of that harrowing experience. And I know that no matter what challenges come my way, I have the strength and resilience to overcome them. I had been working as a food delivery man for years, and despite the challenges that came with the job, I enjoyed the independence it offered. Riding through the bustling streets of the city on my trusty bike, I had seen it all: bad weather, rude customers, and unexpected obstacles. But nothing had prepared me for the horror that awaited me that night. I had received an order to deliver food to a customer on the outskirts of the city. It was a long ride, but I didn't mind. I had my music to keep me company and the promise of a decent tip at the end of it all. As I turned onto a quiet street, I heard a strange noise coming from my bike. I stopped to check it out and found that my rear tire had blown out. I cursed under my breath, knowing that I didn't have a spare tire or any tools to fix it. And to make matters worse, my phone had died earlier in the day, so I couldn't call for help. I looked around, hoping to see a bike shop or a gas station that might be open, but all I could see were darkened houses and quiet streets. I was about to give up hope when I saw a light in the distance. It was a small house, tucked away from the road, but it was the only sign of life that I could see. I took a deep breath and headed towards the house, hoping that whoever lived there would be able to help me. As I got closer, I could see that the house was old and run, down with peeling paint and a crooked roof. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was safe to knock on the door, but I was desperate for help, and the thought of spending the night on the street with a broken bike was too much to bear. I walked up to the door and knocked loudly. For a few moments, there was no answer, and I began to wonder if anyone was home. But just as I was about to give up and leave, I heard footsteps approaching the door. The door creaked open, and an old woman peered out at me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice quavering. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said. "My bike tire blew out, and I don't have a spare or any tools to fix it. I was wondering if I could use your phone to call for help." The old woman looked at me for a moment, her eyes scanning me up and down before she finally nodded and opened the door wider, motioning for me to come inside. "Thank you so much," I said, relieved to have found some help at last. The old woman led me through the cluttered living room and into the kitchen, where she pointed to the phone on the wall. "You can use the phone over there," she said, before shuffling out of the room. I picked up the phone and tried to dial my boss's number, but there was no dial tone. I tried again and again, but still nothing. Frustrated and anxious, I turned around to leave the house when I was suddenly face to face with a man who had just walked in. I was taken aback by his sudden appearance and found myself staring into the cold, menacing eyes of a young man who was clearly the son of the old woman. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" he snarled, stepping closer to me. "I'm sorry," I stammered, backing away. I was just trying to get some help with my bike. The man didn't seem to believe me and took another step closer. His fists clenched tightly. "I think you're lying," he spat. "You're just trying to rob us, aren't you?" I shook my head vigorously, trying to explain my situation, but the man didn't seem to listen. He lunged forward, and I barely had time to duck as he swung a fist at me. I stumbled backwards, knocking over a chair and sending it crashing to the ground. The man was relentless, and he kept coming at me, fists flying. I tried to defend myself, but I was no match for him. I was backed up against the wall, and I knew I was in serious trouble. As the man continued to swing at me, I scrambled to find a way out of the kitchen. But the old woman had blocked the doorway, and I couldn't get past her without risking more violence. I tried to reason with the man, but he was beyond reason. He kept shouting that I was a thief, and that he would teach me a lesson. I was trapped, with no phone, no help, and no way out. The man continued to pummel me with his fists, and I could feel the blood trickling down my face. At some point, I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, I was lying on the floor, surrounded by darkness. When I opened my eyes, I saw that I was in a small, dimly lit room. There was no furniture, no windows, and no door. I was completely alone. My head throbbed with pain, and I could barely move. I knew I had to get out of there, but there seemed to be no way to escape. I don't know how long I was in that room. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly, and I lost track of how many hours had passed. The only thing that kept me going was the thought of my family and the hope that someone would come looking for me. Eventually, I heard the sound of footsteps outside the room. I could hear voices, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. The next thing I knew, the door to the room was opening, and 2 police officers were standing in front of it. They helped me to my feet, and one of them handed me a bottle of water. I drank it greedily, my throat dry from days of not speaking. "We received a call from the son of the woman who found you," one of the officers said. "He reported that you had broken into their home and attacked him." I shook my head, trying to explain what had really happened, but the words came out slurred and garbled. The officers exchanged a look, and one of them said, "Let's take him to the hospital first. He needs medical attention." At the hospital, I was treated for my injuries, and the police officers stayed with me to take my statement. I told them everything that had happened, how I had been lost and looking for help when I stumbled upon the old woman's house. They listened carefully, and when I was finished, they nodded understandingly. "It seems like a big misunderstanding," one of them said. "We'll talk to the family and try to sort things out." A few days later, the police officers returned to the hospital to give me an update. They had talked to the family and explained the situation, and the family had apologized for the mistake. "We're sorry about what happened," one of the officers said. "But we're glad you're okay. Is there anything else we can do for you?" I shook my head, grateful for their help. "No, I just want to go home and be with my family," I said. As I settled back into my normal routine, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Every time I walked past a dark alley or heard footsteps behind me, my heart would start racing, and my palms would become slick with sweat. I tried to tell myself that it was just my imagination, but I knew deep down that I was still traumatized by what had happened to me. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a noise outside my bedroom window. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the wind or an animal, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Trembling with fear, I approached the window and peered out into the darkness. There was nothing there, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. The next day, I went to the police station to report what had happened. They listened to my story, but there was nothing they could do, without any evidence or a suspect. There was no way to pursue an investigation. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. But the feeling of being watched never went away. I started avoiding going out at night and became more paranoid with each passing day. One night, as I was walking home from work, I felt a sudden gust of wind. As I looked up, I saw a figure standing at the end of the alley, watching me intently. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure stepped out of the shadows, revealing a face that I recognized all too well. It was the son of the old woman who had attacked me. He started walking towards me, and I knew I had to run. I turned around and sprinted down the street, my heart racing with terror. I don't know how long I ran, but when I finally stopped, I was gasping for breath and my legs felt like jelly. As I caught my breath, I realized that I had left my phone at home and had no way of calling for help. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching, and I knew that I was in deep trouble. I turned around and saw the son of the old woman standing there, his eyes cold and menacing. "Did you really think you could get away from me?" he sneered. "I've been watching you for months, and now I'm going to make you pay for what you did to my family." My heart sank, and I knew that there was no way out. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable blow, but it never came. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my bed, sweating profusely. It was all just a nightmare, a terrifying reminder of what had happened to me. But even though it was just a dream, I knew that the fear and trauma would stay with me for a long time to come.